you can take away and start to implement, whether it be tomorrow morning at the start of next week, or if you're with a school group at the start of the term later this month. So this evening I'm going to chat with you about how S&C fits into the rowing program, how some of the exercises that we prescribe in the gym, how they relate to the rowing stroke. I'll provide you with some case studies from some injuries that we've had and learnings we've had off the back of that. Also some case studies from some technical changes where S&C has tried to assist. And then I'll finish up with some strategies for balancing training and recovery. So firstly, how S&C fits into rowing. It's essential for injury prevention. The aim of the S&C program is to enhance the rowers' athletic potential and to provide them with a stimulus that they can't get from rowing alone. I like to use the analogy of a race car driver and a race car. So the driver is our rower. They're very skilled, they're very talented, but their overall condition of the car is going to impact their performance. So the better the car, which is their body, the better the performance. S&C, we can enhance movement efficiency. We can help them generate more forces that they can put into the foot plate and the oar. And most importantly, we can address any imbalances, areas of weakness and or tightness to avoid us having any breakdowns or any injuries. So essential strength exercises and how they relate to the rowing stroke. I'm going to use this deterministic model for rowing to demonstrate how certain exercises relate to the rowing stroke. So at the top here, we have total race time, which is the average boat velocity, and that's going to be determined by the distance the boat travels per stroke, and then the stroke rate. So the stroke rate, S&C, we don't have too much of an influence here. Most of that's going to be determined by the skill and the efficiency of the athletes in the boat. We can assist a bit in terms of developing strength and power endurance. Mostly where we're going to have an impact is the distance the boat travels during the drive phase, and then also the distance the boat travels during the recovery phase. So starting with the catch and all the qualities underneath it that we want to develop for a rower. So for a catch, we want to support the development of mobile and stable rowers so we can optimize their catch position and increase the stroke length. So the qualities that we want to develop are mobile and flexible hips and ankles so we can optimize compression and increase the stroke length. And we'll use exercises like a reverse Nordic, a back squat or a deadlift. And I'm sure everyone on the call has seen a back squat or a deadlift, but maybe not everyone knows what a reverse Nordic is. So I put these pictures in here. This is a reverse Nordic. So we're going to ask the individual to actively lower themselves towards the ground, not quite this far, because I'm concerned that they might be taking some load through their lower back. And then to get themselves back up, they would have to flex at their hips likely to bring themselves up. So we want to actively lower to about a 45 degree and then come back up so we can increase the range of motion through the front of the hip. We want to develop stable shoulders and long and strong lats so athletes can control the oars into the water. So we're going to use exercises like a protract retract, which is this one here. So the arm is going to stay extended. We're going to use a band or a cable, and we're just going to ask the rowers to protract and retract their shoulder blade. It's a really subtle movement. I like to use two hands so I can see how the shoulder blades move together, and then at times we only use one hand as well so we can see if there's any imbalances. We'll use things like pull-ups and bench pulls to help develop the lat strength. We also want to develop a strong trunk, so we're not just thinking about the six-pack muscles that we have when we're thinking about the trunk, we're also thinking about the pelvis and the back. So using exercises like a supine hold, which is this one here, Ideally, we have shoulders, hips, and ankles all in one line. Rowers are quite tall individuals, and so some of them can't get into this position or take too much load through their back. So how we regress it is we just ask them to come up, shoulders coming a bit higher there. An extension hold is the same thing, but just face down. And then I like to use a banded hip flexor march. So to help athletes really be able to anchor the pelvis when they're in the catch position and take load through the hip flexors as opposed through the back when they start to drive. And an exercise like this you can put in your warm-up. So we've just got a mini band around the foot and we're just asking the athletes to march. So we're bringing the knee up in a controlled manner and placing the foot back down in a controlled way. We're not trying to yank it up and then just let the foot drop. VSIT ISO is another great one for developing trunk strength. So we're asking rowers to stay up on their hips, to stay tall, keep their shoulder blades retracted, and hold this position for a period of time. Another exercise is something like a farmer's carry. So now moving on to the drive phase. So S&C, we can have the biggest impact in this phase of the stroke. So we want to support the development of explosive extension of the knees and the hips and upper body pulling motion and connecting it with the trunk. So we want to have athletes be able to generate high levels of force during the leg drive and transfer that into the oar to optimize the distance the boat will travel per stroke. We want to help develop strong legs to generate force at the foot plate. And we can use our key lower body lifts like our back squat and our deadlift. I really like to use also unilateral exercises like a split squat. So like this one here or our lunge variations. So we can either identify any imbalances between left and right, or we can start to address any imbalances there. What I've seen a lot with sweep rowers, particularly if they don't have much resistance training, is in things like a back squat, we can have them come to the bottom of the squat, have a bit of a weight shift over to their inside leg, and then really drive out from that leg, and the other leg's just assisting a little bit. Or even if they're coming down, their hips stay in line, they just appear to be more engaged through that inside leg. Generally, they can, when you give them some coaching cues and what have you, they can make the adjustment and push more evenly through both legs. But using exercises like this to help them really isolate that outside leg to develop its strength is great. We want to develop powerful legs and explosive explosive extension at the knee and the hip. So we use exercises that have a little more speed on them. So our Olympic lifts, our med ball toss, our box jumps, and our jump squats. So that's where the athlete has a barbell and maybe some weight on their back and they complete a jump. I tend to limit my athletes to 50 kilos if I use an exercise like that. Just need to consider the weight coming back down on them. We also want to develop a strong trunk so they can transfer force from the legs into the arms when they're pulling the oar. So we use exercises like our dead bug, which is this one here. We want to maintain a nice flat back when extending the arm and the leg. And then something like a bird dog, which is where they're facing the opposite way. So they're facing towards the ground and they're extending the arm and the opposite leg. We just want to be aware that we're not getting a rib flare or an extension in the back. We want to maintain that locked in position. We want to maintain the distance between the rib and the hip while completing that exercise. Might choose something like a Parloff press or a pelvic tilt to help develop the trunk strength. We also want to have strong and coordinated scapular retractors to provide a stable base for transferring force from the foot plate into the hands and the oar. So we use something like a protract retract that I had earlier. Use a side lying scapular press, so asking them to lie on their side with a dumbbell in the hand. And all we're trying to do is move the shoulder blade away from us and then depressing it back down. And you'll find a lot of people have on one side much more range than the other. That's okay. We'll just go through what range we have. Another great one is a scapular push-up. So where the athlete's in the push-up position and we're asking them to bring their shoulder blades together and then move their shoulder blades away from each other. So again, we're protracting, retracting. This one's really good because we're also working the trunk strength in this position as well. We're in that plank position, and for the duration that's going to take them to complete the number of reps that you've prescribed, we're also getting an isometric contraction of the trunk, so pretty much a plank. We want to develop a strong upper body pull to generate forces into the oar. So we'll use exercises like our bench pull, our pull-ups, our rows, whether it be dumbbell, barbell, seated on with the cable, with a single arm, with a narrow grip, with a wide grip, whichever that is, we want to help develop that. Then we also want to, on the land and in the gym, help athletes learn how to sequence their lower body and transfer force into their upper body. So we use things like our Olympic lifts and derivatives of that. Moving on to the finish and how S&C can assist in developing the qualities to improve the athlete's finish. So we want to support the development of trunk and forearm strength capacity to optimize the finish position. So that slight lean back, we want to have a strong trunk to get into that position. And again, we use exercises like our supine holds, our extension holds, V-sits, and our farmer's carry. And then I've gone back and forth with this one with another S&C about robust wrists and forearms to withstand feathering or changes and even bad weather, because at N-Swiss we have had a couple of rowers that it seems to be before our later in the year time trials when the volume and the intensity might be starting to increase a little bit. We might have had some bad weather. We've had athletes have to have forearm surgery because they've had really bad compartment syndrome. So we can use things like a wrist flexion and extension with a dumbbell or with a band to help develop that forearm strength. We can use wrist deviation, so where the thumb is moving towards the body and then away from the body, again with a band or a dumbbell. And then we can do supination and pronation with a dumbbell, a band, or even with a flat bar from your cables. Lastly, the distance the boat travels during the recovery phase. So we want to support the development of trunk strength, hip control and mobility to optimize getting into that rockover position and sliding down into the catch. So we want to develop a strong trunk so they can maintain that tall position and effectively get into the rockover position. We use things like our dead bugs, our bird dogs, our parlor presses, and our pelvic tilts. And then we also want to support the mobile and flexible hips to optimize sliding into the compressed catch position. So again, we can use our reverse Nordics to address the front of the hip. We can use things like our deadlifts to help with the hip hinge, so the actual rockover itself. And we can use a Romanian deadlift as well. When athletes first come to N-Swiss, I don't like to just give them a program and let them go on their merry way with the rest of the group. I like to do an initial screen with them so I can gain an idea of their strengths, their weaknesses, any imbalances they have a bit of a chat about their training history and what they're working towards and how I might be able to assist with what they're working with on the water as well. So firstly, I start with some bilateral exercises. I like to use the back squat to get an understanding of their hip and ankle range. Also, how strong their trunk might be and their quads might be. Also with the deadlift, I like to look at lat strength. So is the bar getting away from them when they're coming off the floor? Are they able to get into this nice flat back position and really retract those shoulder blades before they take the weight? Then I move on to some single leg variations. I really like the forward lunge because athletes have to step forward, they have to decelerate their own weight, and then they have to change direction accelerate back into that start position, as opposed to with reverse lunge, we don't have that real deceleration. So I'm looking at what's happening at the knee, what's happening at the hip, and what's happening at the trunk as well, and how much force are they coming back with to get to that start position. I then want to look at what's going on with the upper body, what the strength capacity might be there. So we're looking at push-ups and pull-ups, which no one really likes when I ask them to do a maximal effort. And then we're also doing some trunk work to finish. So a back iso extension in our GHD. I'm looking to see how long they can hold it for. I'm also looking to see what kind of alignment their trunk is in. Sometimes rowers might have a depressed shoulder and then that they feel like they might be straight, or other times they might have a rotated torso. I like to use this screen also as an opportunity to get in and do a little bit of coaching, see how receptive they are to feedback before I give them a program. So this is what an average week looks like for our N-Swiss rowers in the gym. They come in 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Looking at day one, so we have our movement prep, and that's their warm-up exercises. Then we go into block one, which is generally a power focus. That's where I start to use some of those Olympic lifts or those derivatives, whether we do need speed because we're leading into a competition, or we're just working on a particular part of the lift and trying to develop a skill there. I like to use that block for that opportunity there. Block two is our key lower body strength exercise. And I've got at the top, on Mondays and Fridays, we'll do a bilateral exercise. So we'll squat on Mondays and we'll deadlift on Fridays. I like to do that because they're fresher on Monday, and asking someone to go into a deep range when you're quite fatigued at the back of the week, I feel like is pretty difficult. And then on the Wednesday, I like to use that opportunity to do some sort of unilateral exercise, whether that be a split squat or a step up, just so, again, we can address any weaknesses or any imbalances, I should say, from left to right. Block three is where I like to do the push and pull exercises, so upper body exercises, and then we'll finish off with the trunk. Within the week, with a week as well, what you'll see is on Friday, there is no power block. The athletes are coming in, they've had a full week of training. It's Friday afternoon, they're pretty tired. No one's really keen to have a crack. So what I've done is I've taken the power block. Let's deadlift, but generally got bench press in there too. Let's really nail those two exercises. Let's give it everything we've got for them, and then we'll go home and we can, ease into the weekend. Some take-home exercises. So on the left, I have our exercises, and then on the right, I have our technical priorities. So for our rowers, we want to be squatting, we want to be deadlifting. If you're going to start out with new rowers who haven't had much experience before, starting with just body weight, with dumbbells, with med balls, with kettlebells is a really great place to start. With this rower here, like we just had a dowel on her back, and we're just trying to get that hip hinge movement going. And I was trying to use the wall as some feedback for her to really get her hips back. We want to have some sort of push and pull in there, ideally in the vertical and in the horizontal planes, some sort of lunging and different variations, forward lunging, reverse lunging, and lateral lunging as well. I know in rowing, they don't use their adductors much, but I think it's really good for overall development of their lower body that we do some adductor work as well. For core exercises, we want to ensure that we're training the core in a number of different ways. So we're flexing, we're extending, we're rotating, we're resisting being rotated, we're laterally flexing, and we're resisting being laterally flexed as well. So again, on the right, these are our priorities. We're ensuring that there's good mobility through the ankles, the hips, and the thoracic before we start to really progress load. That the athletes are stable in the hips and in the shoulders before we let them continue going up in load. We might need to regress the exercise itself. that there's controlled movement through the exercise. So they can complete the movement slowly. So we're not dropping to, like, not loading the bar up really heavy, dropping to the bottom of a squat in an uncontrolled way. You know, there being a lot of movement at the bottom and then all of a sudden we're driving out. I've had that where athletes are concentrically really strong, but being able to control the movement, be stable, they're less controlled. So we want to take some weight off and make sure that's a high priority. In terms of symmetry, so we'll use our bilateral exercises to generate high levels of force. So we can load the bar up a lot if they are competent, and then we'll use our unilateral exercises. We'll pepper it through the program to make sure we're addressing any imbalances or any weaknesses between left and right. This is a core poster. I'm sure a lot of people have seen this, that Rowing Australia have on their website. I think this is great. I use it a lot of the time to select my trunk exercises. I think, you know, today I want to flex and extend. So I go and I might say, all right, let's do leg lowers and we're going to do extension holds. Then maybe another day I want to rotate and I want to work on their lateral flexors as well. So I select one of these two exercises. It's a really great resource. Moving on to injury prevention strategies, some case studies, some risks and some plans that we've had in place. I wanted to use this infographic from World Rowing on lower back pain because I think they've made it really simple. If you haven't already got it in your club or in your school, please print it off and have it around so that athletes can have a look at it and coaches can have a look as well. It's really good in terms of identifying when, you know, the back isn't feeling so good and what you can do, what risks you can modify and what risks you can't. So now onto the case studies. I'll start with lower back injuries. They're common among rowers because of the repetitive nature of the sport. There's a significant stress that's placed on the lower back during rowing. So we can get muscle strains, we can get disc herniations, we can get stress fractures of the vertebrae, and we can get inflammation and degeneration of the joints. So what I will say is a weak structure that is placed under load will very likely break. So if someone's not feeling 100% and they really load up, the likelihood of them injuring themselves is going to increase. So making sure that we can identify periods when load and exercises need to be modified, not removed, just modified, it's key. So starting with athlete A, this athlete's had a muscle strain during a back squat in May of 2021. A non-modifiable risk that they have is they have a previous history of disc degeneration and facet joint sprain. For this particular strain, they've had a reduced hip mobility due to increased study load. So they were in an exam block. That's a modifiable risk. Studying for exams is not modifiable, but having a reduced hip mobility going into a back squat, that is something could have been done to help, and the likelihood of us having that strain probably would have been lower. So the acute phase for rehab is we want to be pain-free. We're going to start cross training and we're going to stay in the gym, but we're going to modify the program. We want to keep training as close to a full training load as possible. You know, we want to ensure that all the other structures in the body are still strong and work towards getting that muscle itself strong again. So subacute phase, once they're pain-free, we want to introduce some rowing movements. We want to increase rowing. We'll decrease the cross-training progressively, and we'll remain consistent with the modified gym program. Long-term phase, for this particular rower, it's a behavioral thing. So we need them to identify when they've had higher sitting loads, and we need to help increase the mobility of their hips with some exercises. We also ask that, you know, when you do have periods when you're sitting down, you're studying for exams, please take some small breaks regularly. And next time, you know, hopefully you can identify your back's not feeling good and you can go and do your extra exercises, or you can come speak with the physio, with the strength coach, or with your rowing coach about your back not feeling so great, and everyone can help make some changes in the program. So athlete B, we've got a muscle strain during a back squat in July of 2023. So again, we have a previous history of back injuries, which is a non-modifiable risk. We have a reduced resistance training load due to competition. I would say this is a non-modifiable risk as well. This athlete has gone overseas to compete for Australia. And so access to the gym, there was no access to gym while they were there. There was also, a higher emphasis put on rowing itself so that everyone in the boat can row together. That's fine. That's not modifiable. Acute phase is the same. We want to be pain-free. We're going to cross-train and we're going to modify the gym. Subacute phase is also the same. We want to introduce rowing movements once pain-free. We want to increase rowing, reduce cross-training progressively, and remain consistent with a modified gym program. Long-term, for this particular athlete, we now know always a modified program when coming back from a competition block. So we'll slowly work towards back squat. So like in January, we have our clubs go on camps, and then they go straight into small boats regatta. A couple of weeks later, we have nationals. And then, not long after that, we also have selections for the national team. So we now know during this block of higher competition, we're going to, when we do have resistance training sessions, we're going to remove the back squat. We're going to modify it for a leg press. And when we come back to a proper training block, we'll do 1 or 2 sets of back squat at a lighter load just to go through the range, make sure things feel good. And for our high force exercise, we'll use a leg press. Sweet. Athlete C, muscle strain during a hang clean in February of 2024. So again, we have a previous history of lower back injuries, which we can't modify. We have a reduced resistance training load. So there's a lack of consistency leading into this injury. Of the last 26 sessions, they completed 15. That's only a 57% adherence to the training. That's a modifiable risk. We should have that number being a lot higher. Like I would be happier with an 80 and 85, preferably 100. A 57 is not good enough. We have reduced hip mobility due to increased sitting loads. There's this is because of work. So the athlete has had to travel for work in the car for a long period of time the day before, and then they've come into the gym and done and strained their back. So acute phase, again, we want to be pain-free. We're going to cross-train. We're going to modify the gym. We're going to introduce rowing movements. We're going to increase the rowing load, and we're going to decrease the cross-training progressively. We're going to remain consistent with the rowing, with the modified gym. Long-term phase now has happened in February of 2024. This athlete doesn't really need to, the next thing that they're now working towards is October of 2024. So we've got a long lead in. So what we're going to do is modify the gym program. We're going to do additional trunk control work. So rather than being 3 full body strength sessions, we're going to pull one of them back and we're going to make it a core session. We're really going to focus on making this trunk bulletproof. So athlete D, we've got a lumbar pain. We've got nerve tension in January of 2024. We've got a previous history of back injuries, which we can't modify. And we've got an increased rowing load. So they're fatigued. They've got more of that repetitive movement than what they usually do. I would say that's also non-modifiable in this athlete's circumstance. They are working towards going to the junior worlds later this year. So they need to be in the boat with their crew members. They need to all be rowing together. And because we've identified, or the athlete has identified, this pain and not continued to try and train through it in the gym and a little bit in the water as well, we've gone acute phase into long term. So we want them to be pain-free, and long term, we're modifying the gym and the back's feeling tight. So when the back's feeling good, we're doing the full gym program. When the back's not feeling so good, we're seeing physio, we're having a chat, we're modifying the exercise, and or we're modifying the weights that they're lifting. So it's really sad to say that athlete A, B, and C is the same individual. It's upsetting to see anyone hurt themselves in the gym, particularly someone to hurt themselves multiple times in the gym when there have been modifiable risks. Had we championed the rower enough to be able to be aware that, hey, my body's not feeling good, and then either I'm going to do something about it by managing it myself, or preferably I'm going to have a chat with my coach, have a chat with the physio, and have a chat with the strength coach, and bring them in and help me modify my program. That's the ideal situation.
Kellyanne, it's just Elliot here. Just a quick one.
Yeah.
So how much of that would you say is a communication priority for the athlete and their team that's supporting them? I'm just thinking about for a lot of the people who are on the meeting tonight, being club and school coaches.
Yeah.
How much of that do you think it's important to include the strength training coach as in those discussions?
I think it's really important. We have teams of individuals around these athletes, and I know we're all time poor. It doesn't have to be, ideally it's a phone call. It could be a text message, it could be an email to firstly identify like, hey, we're having to reduce their rowing load, or, they're having some more treatment with soft tissue. Most of it, I feel like this rower is old enough and experienced enough. We need to ensure that they can speak up and that they can come to each of us, and that like they can almost start the conversation and then we start to link in with each other. Yeah, I think communication is key in terms of everyone being across everything. And if you think someone knows, like, don't make that assumption, just go have a chat. And what I've learned is some of the behaviors that I see in the gym when I talk to the rowing coaches, they see very similar behaviors. So if we can also all send the same messaging to try and reduce the likelihood of this happening, then that would be ideal.
Fantastic. Just a quick one there, for everyone that's joined the call. If you may have missed the intro at the beginning, if you have any questions for the end, please do add them to the Q&A section or the chat, and we'll make sure that that Kellyanne has an opportunity to address them at the end of the presentation. Thanks.
Thank you. So moving on to rib stress fractures. So another really big injury that would have a rower outside of the boat. So this is caused from muscle imbalances and weaknesses. So a weak core, also imbalances in strength in the torso. So they're taking uneven forces through the ribs. So athlete A, B, and C, they've all done a rib stress fracture, and the rehab plan is the same for each of them. But athlete A, their contributing factors are a bit different to athlete B and C. So athlete A, they had an increased rowing intensity load. So that's a non-modifiable risk. They were working towards trials, and we had to get that high intensity work in. They had decreased energy availability at the time that they did the rib stress fracture, or that they did, I think it might have been just a rib strain at that point. That's a modifiable risk. Ensuring that our athletes know when they need to eat and how much they need to eat is something that is avoidable, or that they should know, so that we don't end up in this situation. Then this athlete as well, they had a low chronic resistance training load. There was a lack of consistency in the gym. So we're in the gym, we're trying to address any of these imbalances. We're strengthening the core, the back, the intercostal muscles, so they can all support the rib cage and reduce the likelihood of strain. We need to ensure that we're keeping a high adherence rate there. The rehab plan, in terms of acute and subacute, is the same as a back. We want to be pain-free. We're going to cross-train. We're going to complete a modified gym program. Subacute, we're going to introduce some rowing movements. We're going to increase the rowing load, and we're going to decrease the resistance training progressively. We want to remain consistent with the modified gym program. Also add during this subacute phase, it's not necessarily linear. It's not like we're in the boat and then we're slowly just dropping off cross training. We might have weeks where we've been in the boat and we've slowly been progressing the kilometers. And then the following week, we might end up getting to a Tuesday and we're having to get off the erg, get on the bike. The Wednesday, we're not on water, we're still on the bike. The Thursday, we get back on the water. It fluctuates, and that's okay. And we need to also communicate that to the athletes, that when what they might be perceived as big setbacks, they're not. They're just a part of the journey, and it's okay. We just need to provide them with some reassurance there. Long-term phase, we want to remain consistent with the gym, and we want to consult the dietitian to increase energy availability and implement strategies for our rowers on these busy days. The rowers that I work with, they're rowing like they're pretty much completing part-time, like it's a part-time job or a full-time job. They're working, they're studying, they're trying to maintain their relationships with their friends and their family. They've got a lot going on. So we can help them on days where they might go from training on water to work to training in the gym to having dinner with friends or their family. How can we ensure that they have strategies in place, that they're getting enough food in? Athlete B and C, so they have an increased rowing intensity load, which again is a non-modifiable risk. They're getting ready to go overseas and compete for Australia. So they need to get that intensity work in. Both of them have a history of decreased energy availability. That's a non-modifiable risk. We can't go back in time and change that. But what's a shame is when these rib issues have occurred again, they've got decreased energy availability at that time. So we haven't learnt from previous behaviours. So again, we need to consult with the dietitian and ensure that they are getting enough food in. I'd also like to add, all these athletes are females. Nutrition plays a huge role in rib stress fractures. In my time at NSWIS, and I've been there close to 3.5 years, I've seen one male athlete with a rib stress fracture, and I've seen another one that I was concerned might end up with one because I was concerned about energy availability. Whether that is because of societal pressures for them to maybe not eat as much or look a certain way, we need to let them know that they're training a lot and some performance is important, and being in the boat is important, staying injury-free and healthy. So onto some technical deficiencies and how SSC has assisted. So athlete A, they have their knees remained flexed when they get into that initial rock over position. And some contributing factors are they are shorter than the rest of the rowers in their boat. We can't do much about that. We can't stretch him out. He probably won't grow much more given his age. He feels tightness behind his knees as well when he is in that extended position. Like his knees are extended, I should say. And then we also have reduced ankle mobility and a tight posterior chain. So he's got tight calves, he's got tight hamstrings, he's got tight glutes. So the physio completed a knee to wall test. So this is a ruler, or you could have a bit of tape on the ground and mark it with centimeters. What you want the athlete to do is to keep their foot flat on the ground and try and get their knee to touch the wall. If their knee can touch the wall, then you shift the foot back until they can't. And then you're going to take the measurement from the big toe. So this particular athlete's knee to wall was 12 and 11 centimeters. And I've been told 18 centimeters is good. So it's quite low. Our plan for this athlete to help them with that rock over, getting through that rock over position, keeping their knees flat, is we've given them some P&F stretching to complete pre-row. So that's where we have the athlete stretch, so it's a partnered. So they stretch and then they contract a little bit, and then we stretch a bit more, and we can go for, we can get increased range of motion with each stretch and contraction. This athlete has also admitted to not stretching much. So I challenge them, can you stretch pre and post row or pre and post erg for the next 2 days? So when I see you next, I'm going to ask you if you've done it. I just want you to go from your toes to your head and complete every muscle in your body. And then the physio has also given them a banded distraction, which is this exercise here to help with their ankle range of motion. Athlete B, they're unstable during the drive phase of the stroke. So some contributing factors is the time that they've spent with their crew members. I've also found out recently they're predominantly have been a sculler in the past and they're now sweeping. I think it might also have something to do with the position that they are in the boat, the seat that they're in, they're a bit further back. But what we've been able to do on the land is we've modified their gym program. It's important that we help trying to keep them in that stable position. And we're lucky enough that they're already very strong in those traditional strength exercises like our back squat and our deadlift. So what we've done is we've gone more trunk control work. So Monday is a normal session, Friday is a normal session, Wednesday we'll do key lower body lift and then into a core circuit. So some take homes for injury prevention strategies, we want warm up and cool down. With our warm up, we want to have dynamic stretching to start into some activation. When it comes to strength training, we want to have proper technique overload. We want to ensure that we're moving correctly before we start loading the bar. We want to ensure that there's flexibility in our programs. And with that as well, I strongly suggest to some of our rowers that even while you're doing your strength training, I want you to do some flex in between. If you're back squatting and your hips are tight, do your first set and then do some more stretching. Do your second set. You'll find by the time you get to your working sets, you're feeling a lot better. You feel more stable in that bottom position. You can really drive out. They're going to get conditioning with their on water work. This is a big one. That's why I've made it bold and underline it. Injury awareness. So we want to educate our athletes about being aware of their body. We want them to recognize signs early when things are not feeling okay and be proactive. At the NSWIS, at clubs, at schools, at NTC, we want them to know that, okay, my back's not feeling so great. I should do some mobility work. I should speak with physio, with coach, with S&C. My ribs not feeling so good. I'm going, well, maybe I haven't eaten so well yesterday and today. I should go see the dietitian. I should have some more food and I should speak to coach, physio, S&C. We want to champion these athletes to be able to manage their body themselves and be able to come to each of the disciplines or whoever it might be to help also provide them with some strategies to make some changes. Again, going back to the analogy of the race car driver, in relation to injury prevention, everyone's going to have to stop in the pits at some point in the race. We just want to make sure we stop in at the right time. We stop in early enough that we're not going to wear out our tires too much and end up sliding around the racetrack and end up having some sort of crash. We need to be aware of our athletes' mental health. So during exam periods, there is some research to suggest that we increase the likelihood of injuries. There was some research done in a college in the US and they found an increase in their injuries during that period. We also want to be aware of helping them balance their work life and training. Recovery, you can't go past sleep and nutrition. Sleep is free. Nutrition's a little more exy these days, but they are your top two in terms of recovery. This is another poster from Rowing Australia that you can find on their website. So it provides some suggestions in terms of that active mobility before jumping on the water, and then the activation, some exercises before you jump on water, which is great as well. And then lastly, balancing training intensity and recovery. So this is crucial to optimizing performance and preventing overtraining or injury in rowers. So in terms of periodization, on water, there's going to be periodization. On the land, we have periodization as well. We're going to vary the intensity and the focus. So during the prep period, we're going to have higher volume and we're going to have moderate intensity. During the comp, we're going to drop the volume, we're going to ramp up the intensity. And during the transition phase, we're going to have just moderate across the board. Monitoring is really important. Ideally, we have some objective and subjective measures. That's the best mix in terms of understanding how the athletes are tolerating the training load and how they're adapting to it. So we can have, in terms of getting a volume, measure, we can use volume load in the gym, you can use kilometers on the water or minutes training. In terms of intensity, we can look at heart rate, or we can use an RPE scale. We want to gradually increase the load so we can avoid overtraining and injury. With recovery, we want to have light days and cross-training days. We want to have rest days. Even on the land, I like my week to, it's quite what ends up on the bar is quite heavy on the Monday and the Friday. What's on the bar with that unilateral focus on the Wednesday is a little bit lighter, and then the volume's a lot lighter on the Friday as well. Again, sleep and nutrition are key, and then body awareness. Athletes understanding when they're persistently fatigued as like performance staff and coaches, we can see that as well. We can have a chat with them. We can see when they're irritable or when there might be some sort of decreased performance. But thank you everyone for listening. And if there's any questions, just fire away.
So folks, just before you ask the question, just make sure to unmute your microphone or raise your hand using the little raise your hand icon like I've just done up there. It's in the top of your window, just so that we're not talking over each other. I guess I'll start with one there, Kellyanne. I think a lot of the people on the call are likely going to be school and or club coaches. And so with that context in mind, what do you see from athletes coming out of, I guess, pathway to pathway that that they're missing when they get to you in the gym, and that they need to be working on in their environments where they are now, so that if they are on that trajectory to representation, that they're doing the things now to be prepared for that?
I'm actually surprised at how unstable some of them are when they come into the gym for the first time. So I'm really surprised by the lack of core strength they have. Also, like the positions that they're in a boat, it's amazing that they're so unstable on the land, and that's from the shoulder as well. So starting with some core exercises, whether that be if they don't have a dedicated gym session, at the end of a row, just picking some lighter ones, like a leg lower. Doesn't require much. It requires no equipment, like very little space. And then, you can pick something like a bird dog, which again requires no equipment, very little space. And we're working both sides of the trunk. And then just something like that SCAP protract, retract, that's a really easy one that athletes just don't have that awareness of retracting their shoulder blades to create a nice flat back. Another thing that I think is just being curious and being willing to ask the question of either why am I doing this or how could I improve. I think allowing them those spaces and encouraging them at those lower levels to start to ask those questions, because I see a lot of my job as an education piece. I'm a part of the journey where they eventually end up at an NTC. So my job is also to educate them on how to train. So when they do get up to that next level, they're in a better condition than when they'd walked in, not just physically, but just also in terms of understanding everything that is involved with being an elite athlete.